Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast that looks at cycling purely from an aesthetic and superficial point of view. I'm your host, Alex. I'm joined by my regular co-hosts, Tony and Warren, and we've got a really exciting episode this week because we have a great interview with Mike Yak, founder of Blacksmith Cycle, which is a dream bike factory, and he was on the podcast to talk about custom bike aesthetics. That's a great interview that we have coming later on the episode today. But before we get into that, we have something really exciting this week, which is that if you wear women's cycling kit, well, we have a treat for you because we have a giveaway this week in collaboration with Montreal-based brand Peppermint Cycling. The giveaway is going to be working in the following way. So Peppermint's going to be giving out a winter cycling kit. So it's going to be a piece of cycling kit, but made for winter. And what we want to hear for you to win the giveaway is you need to send us a DM on Instagram at Cycling Fashion Week, or send us an email at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com telling us the weirdest piece of winter kit that you've ever worn. So the conditions are that you have to follow Cycling Fashion Week on Instagram, and you also have to follow Peppermint Cycling on Instagram. You send us a DM or an email. You tell us what's the weirdest piece of cycling kit in the winter that you've ever worn. What we'll do is we'll select the funniest replies that we got, or the funniest submissions. We'll read them on the podcast, and the funniest one will win the giveaway. Peppermint will get in touch with you, and they'll ship you a piece of winter kit. The reason why we ask what's the weirdest piece of kit that you've ever worn in the winter is because when people start cycling, typically winter kit's not the first thing that they will go ahead and invest in or build out their wardrobe. People tend to ride in the summer mostly, so it can lead to some funny kit combinations in the winter. For example, I've worn a bunch of ski gear, or Patagucci fleece as well. So we're looking forward to hear what our listeners have worn in terms of winter kit, and that can allow you to win a giveaway from our friends over at Peppermint Cycling.
Yeah, Alex, I feel like we're going to get a lot of not, and they can send this in, but a lot of people with mittens. That's knitted mittens. That's something I've seen. When people are sort of getting early into colder weather riding and they haven't fully gone to winter cycling gloves. You'll see someone sort of decked out with a pair of their grandma's knitted mittens, but I'm pretty sure there'll be some funny combinations and things people have pulled out of old clothing bins just to keep themselves warm before they got all their winter gear they needed.
I've worn some ski gear. I've worn some Patagucci fleece. It's been all over the spectrum. So I'm pretty keen to hear what people have to say there.
North Face Gore-Tex for me.
Okay, so getting into our first segment this week, where we look at new releases. Actually, there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about this week. Let's start with this one, which I thought was really interesting. So it's a Stella McCartney collaboration with Cannondale, where British fashion designer Stella McCartney teamed up with Cannondale to create, I quote, the boldest bike collection ever seen. So Cannondale launched these System 6 and Super 6 Evo road bike models, which have been painted by a variety of artists from London, New York, and Antwerp. Stella McCartney, the fashion designer, was one of those collaborations. They've got other artists, Ed Cudis in London, Macy Broom in New York, Tom Toussaint in Antwerp. They've teamed up with McCartney and Cannondale. They've come up with some interesting paint jobs for the System 6 and the Super 6 Evo. Just going to describe them. One has sort of white and black stripes looking a little bit like a zebra. Another one has some stuff written in red on a white background, looking a little bit actually like the Tax the Rich dress that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was wearing, I think, at the Met Gala in New York a couple months back. Anyways, some really, really bold designs there on Cannondale's part, perhaps reminiscent a little bit of what they did with Palace. I think, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember, at one of the Grand Tours. So definitely not unheard of for Cannondale, guys. What did we think about that?
So I think first off, to state, and this is my understanding of it, is that they're not selling these. This isn't These are sort of one-off bikes that I believe will be given away at Stella McCartney stores. So it's not, you're not going to go into your local shop and get this, or probably even be able to buy it on, StockX after sale. So this is purely sort of probably marketing piece for Cannondale, sort of an art piece. It's not a commercial collaboration. I don't know how much I think it's worth getting into the designs, because it's, whether I'm criticizing the artist, it's more of a question of whether, to me, looking at this stuff, it's going to bring a lot of eyes. Kind of similar to Palace, although Palace is niche in its own way because it's a skateboarding brand. But is this good or bad for cycling? Sort of in general, to have Stella McCartney is very famous on her own right, and then her father is someone people have generally heard of, and having that kind of cachet with it. Is it good for cycling? Is it bad for cycling? That's kind of when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about, because I think the designs are cool. I think they're neat, but no one's going to buy. You can't buy them, so it's not sort of whether they're good or bad for being out on the road with them. It's just kind of what does someone like Stella McCartney collaborating with a brand like Cannondale mean for cycling?
When I saw these, I actually kind of wondered if we had to shut down the podcast. I mean, isn't this kind of the epitome of what we're about? Cycling, fashion, worlds colliding? I mean, I think I'm for it. I don't really see any harm of it. I don't mind the designs. I mean, I'm not really into high fashion, if I'm being honest, but like outside of cycling, obviously extremely high fashion on the bike. Maybe it's more of a shrug for me, and yeah, it's not really inspiring a hot take in me, so they can't be that good or bad.
Warren, I think your take, you nailed it initially, then your take became wrong as you went along. But I think, this is great. We're a cycling fashion podcast. This is, the worlds of cycling and design slash art slash fashion colliding. This is what we do here on Cycling Fashion Week. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's bringing some outside eyes on the world of cycling that maybe don't come from sport. They come from design. They come from, a more sort of artsy kind of field. I think it's fantastic. I think the designs are cool. Would I ride this bike? No, but again, that's a moot point since it won't be available to me. But I think it's I think it's certainly interesting. I'm glad that they're doing that.
I just want to make one more comment, because it's just more of a shout out. Like, as I was kind of thinking about the art and design, because again, it's kind of cool. But a couple of years back, there was Specialized had a track team that raced the Red Hood Crit, and they did, for each of those races, they did a collaboration for their LA track bike with various artists, and those are just better paint jobs. Like, that's all I want to say. Is like, I think having more visibility of cycling is cool. Stella McCartney is a big name, very famous. But if you're looking at artist collaboration bikes, and you're kind of, you thought the Stella McCartney was interesting, look up the Specialized LA track Red Hook Crit bikes that they did. Much cooler stuff.
All right, next item we're going to talk about. So this actually didn't come out this week. I think it came out maybe 3 weeks ago, but we didn't get to it on the last podcast. So Rafa released the Balmamian club jersey, or the collection, if you will, which is a special edition merino wool jersey for all round road riding, which is meant to honor Franco Balmamian's first Giro win. So it looks like merino. It's got an extremely vintage look to it, straight out of, I'm going to guess, the 50s or the 60s. The jerseys generally say L'Aquilotto del Canavese. They're black, they're white, they're pink. So extremely vintage here from Rafa's part. Something that I feel like they had done before, but they just released that a couple of weeks ago. Who wants to go ahead and comment on this?
So I feel like there's this seems to be an issue with anytime Rafa releases anything, is the consistency, to me, of the collection. So like, looking at this collection, the short sleeve sort of black and white striped one, I think it's beautiful, and you kind of zoom in, and it does really hold a heritage look. But then I look at the other stuff. There's a long sleeve one. There's another short sleeve with sort of pink details and stuff. That looks like a bad kind of vintage modern combo. Like, it doesn't. And I noticed that when we talked about the Rafa logo collection, like, it seems that they can't put a whole collection together. Because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, that's actually kind of nice. that could be kind of a unique one. I know that we all ride metal bikes, and sometimes places will do metal bike rides, kind of a vintage throwback. Oh, I could see myself with that. But then I look at the other ones, and they look sort of cheap, and they're like they're sort of too, like they're trying to be modern retro, and it kind of doesn't sort of look good in either era and stuff. So there's some good stuff, but I find Rafa always, when they release a whole collection, it's never consistent across the board. There's always a piece you love, and then a bunch of pieces you could throw away.
I think that's an astute observation, Tony. Because as soon as you said that, kind of started thinking about all the collections that Rafa's put out and nodding along. I don't really have much to say about this. I kind of glossed over it when I got the email from Rafa, and a cousin of mine who's big into cycling. He actually sent me a link to it separately because he's an avid listener of the podcast, and his email just said, "This is trash." And that's pretty much kind of my feeling. I know, Tony, you said you're into one, but for me, I don't know, it just not doing it for me. So as my cousin Denby would say, this is trash.
I do want to shout out merino wool as like a miracle fabric, though.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I don't think it's trash. I think it's beautiful to look at. I mean, the designs are beautiful. The typefaces that are used on the jersey where it says La Culotta del Canavese, which is the nickname of Franco Balmamian. I think it's beautiful. Like Rafa does beautiful stuff. Putting aside the questions of consistency of the collection, like Tony said, which is actually a good point, which I hadn't thought of. To me, the question is twofold. Number one, it feels like that's been done about a million times before. Brands coming out just basically copying a jersey from the 50s or 60s a long time ago. It's not super creative. Like, look, I'm a big heritage guy. I love the heritage of cycling and I love honoring that heritage. But I do find that these extra vintage releases, they've been done before. So it's not especially creative or innovative, but it doesn't need to be either. Like not everything needs to be new and we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. But there's just, a certain lack of originality there. The second thing I would say is, would I wear this myself, basically? And this is a classic case. And I found that as I've gotten older, it's like I don't need to own everything. I can appreciate things from afar and say, this is beautiful, but it's not for me and I don't need to own it. And this is exactly in that category. Like I love looking at these pictures online, and I actually hope I'll see someone on the road wearing that just so I can kind of see what it looks like for real. But I just don't really see myself wearing that on the road. It's a little bit too much in terms of the vintagey feel. Like for example, the Rafa basic jersey, which is made of merino and has the armband, you could argue is also kind of vintage inspired, but it's like just the right amount of vintage that it's not too much. Whereas this is like they're going way overboard on vintage, and it almost looks like you're going to a Halloween party dressed as like Pulidor or Eddie Merckx or something like that. It's just a bit of a caricature.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Alex, when you said inspired. Something can be inspired, like vintage inspired, versus just a vintage replica, which is what this is. So I guess I'm just more of a vintage inspiration and not full on vintage replica. To me, this is like wearing like, a baseball or football jersey to the game with like a player's name and number on it, which I won't dive into that. That's other sports. That's cycling, but that's no.
Also the buttons on the pockets, I just don't understand. They just don't make any sense. What the hell am I going to undo a button while I've got my gels in there? Like,
It's an extremely aggressive look. I mean, some people will go for it. I find it a little bit too much for myself. Next release we're going to talk about, so Castelli, which we talked about several times on the podcast. They're kind of unavoidable in cycling. They introduced the new Gabba and Perfetto limited edition jackets. So it's two of obviously their best-selling products. The Gabba, which is a legendary product. So again, it's wind protection with Gore-Tex Infinium. So I didn't know Gore-Tex Infinium was a thing. I know Gore-Tex, I know Gore-Tex Pro, I know Gore-Tex Pro 2.0, but I didn't know Gore-Tex Infinium existed. Anyway, they came out with that water protection and breathability. They released it, so the jersey is kind of interesting looking. It's black and it's got, I'm not sure what the pattern is. It looks like almost like a leaf or like a flower, but very, very small, kind of splattered all over the jersey. It has the water repellent features of the famous GABA. So they just came out with that. It's got relatively long sleeves, I would say. The jersey, it goes almost to the elbow, as is the current trend. So Castelli doing what Castelli does, releasing a new version of the rain jacket and the GABA. What did you guys think about that?
So, I mean, I think that this is where, and I guess this is kind of what set, because Stella seems to have like some nice ideas, but I guess this is what separates them from like a true sort of cycling fashion brand. Is that in the Perfetto light jacket? I think that this, the pattern's kind of cool, and sometimes in winter maybe you can get away with a little bit more. But then I guess because they're still selling to the sort of average Joe who's more concerned about safety than we are, they've put the high vis sort or the reflective stripes on the shoulders, and it just ruins it. Like it destroys it. Like I would buy this thing for sure because I think it's kind of neat, and the Costello's performance is great and stuff, and then that just like destroys it. Like there's not a chance in hell I'm buying this thing just because of these reflective stripes. Like it just ruined it, and I get it. I get that probably the designer, the designers over at Pattern Mal or MAP or something, they know safety is important. They want to keep their stuff sort of more minimal and the reflective strips minimal. And then Costello's a little bigger brand that used to be sold at Mech and are kind of catering to a different clientele is really thinking about their sort of winter safety cycling. But for me, from a stag point, it just destroyed by these reflective stripes.
I think that's the design of the Perfetto normally, is to have those. I agree, it's ugly. It looks like little pieces of duct tape, like keeping the sleeves attached to the body of the jacket. So I'll just say it seems like they're following that design, but I agree. If you're going to go to the trouble of making this limited edition attempt at like kind of designy thing, like ditch those two. Because yeah, I could get into this pattern otherwise. And then, of course, the other problem is the Castelli logo's on it.
But it's small. It's smaller. It's just, I mean, it's on it, but it's smaller. It's a little hard to see. I mean, it's sort of too bad that they couldn't just make the actual splatter reflective, and then the whole fucking thing is reflective, right? And then you get rid of that. You're super safe. Bugs every car that rides by you, I guess. But I don't know. So the devil's in the details, and this missed out on that.
I actually love it. I think you guys are being harsh. I mean, I love the pattern. I think it's really, really cool. I love like a black jersey with a lot of white on it. I find it looks great. It pops. It's a great combination. Can't go wrong with it. Yeah, the fit. Just looking at the pictures of how it came out, I mean, the fit looks fantastic. At least on the models that they use there. But if you have a somewhat regular body type, I'm sure it fits great. So our co-host who is occasionally on the podcast, Lily Hanson Gillis. She's a cycling journalist and writer. So I saw recently she posted on her Instagram. She's part of a team where I'm guessing they do some races, UTRR, and they had a custom kit made by Castelli, and I thought it looked pretty good. Like Castelli is kind of slightly climbing in my esteem of various brands, but sadly, as Warren says, the fucking logo. I just can't look at their logo. They got to do something with the logo. It's a great brand, great heritage, great products, but that goddamn logo is so ugly. I would buy a ton of Castelli products if it weren't for that ugly logo.
Just so everyone knows, Lily designed that kit you're talking about for her team. So she's a Renaissance woman, designer, writer, cyclist, everything.
Well, shout out to Lily, who obviously gets high grades from the Panache Police, of which she is a part. But yeah, no, it's. I think it looks good, but that logo just ruins it, unfortunately.
All right, so next up, we are welcoming a very special guest. He is the reason Warren and I ride such nice bikes. That we get compliments every time we're out on the group ride, wherever we're doing, whatever we post online. He is the owner of Blacksmith Cycles in Toronto, Canada. Please welcome to the podcast, Mike Yak. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. And I would say you own those bikes because you have good taste, but I'm glad I could play a small part in getting them out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's what when people ask me a bit about, the process, obviously there's a lot, you're letting us choose, but you really helped, and I wasn't there for Warren's process, but I'm sure it was the same. pick those little bits out, sort of choose, maybe this stem's better, this, oh, you want this, both Warren and our bike. My bike is, the custom geometry, so making sure we got the slopes right. So it's a lot of little things that, we have the grand vision, and you're the devil in the details. Before we get into the nitty gritty of Blacksmith, and you as an owner and what's going on, I have an important question to ask you. Did you used to skateboard or snowboard?
Neither. I grew up a skier, not a snowboarder, because snowboarding didn't exist. And I've always liked skateboard culture. My younger brother was massive into skateboarding, so I spent a lot of years taking him to skate parks and being the nice older brother on the sidelines. I'm a really bad at board sports. Good with my hands, bad with balance. That's why I crash my bike so much.
Yeah. See, I mean, I asked you that for, well, one reason. We've had a couple guests before that sort of said skateboarding and snowboarding was their pathway to cycling. But for me, I ask it because to me, there's a lot of sort of cultural similarities to the skateboard shops Warren and I used to go in growing up. You've got the big TV and the couch with stuff sort of playing on the background if people want to come and sit in. You're not sort of there just always to sort of sell people. You like the community of cycling. You like talking about bikes. If I'm in the neighborhood, I'll just come in and chat with you guys, and kind of just, window shop, browse, appreciate the nice things that are in there. And I kind of always sort of liken that to when I was a teenager skateboarding in Toronto, and you'd sort of go into a shop and you talk to the guys there and talk about boards and watch a skate video and kind of be there for a little while. So I sort of noticed that similarity. I was wondering if you would come from that background to kind of build that culture at the shop.
I appreciate it. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think what you're describing, I think, also describes really what an old school bike shop is. If you travel to Europe or go to some of the older spots in the US that are, you're really entrenched, road dealers of 20, 30, 40 years. A lot of those shops are that style, more of a community space and somewhere that hopefully fosters cycling culture. Yeah, that it's not all about just making the sale. And certainly for us, we like the process of building interesting bikes and getting to know our customers. And when I started the shop, there were definitely thoughts about what we could bring that was not at your normal Toronto bike shop. Probably just more influence from just trying to create a retail setting that I would want to be in, and that is makes it comfortable to hang out because, a lot of the bikes we build, we spend hours consulting and tweaking. And so, we want it to be a spot where you can chill and feel welcome and not feel like it's somewhere you have to buy something every time you walk in the door.
Sort of speaking of that with, your kind of desire of what you want in the shop, can you just tell us a little bit how you got into cycling, and then kind of, how you got into the industry as an owner and as a bike creator, and sort of in the end, why you started Blacksmith, what's inspired you to sort of make this unique experience?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I definitely took a bit of a weird route. Not, someone who worked in bike shops when I was a kid. But I guess, I mean, I'll go back. I've been riding road bikes for probably around 25 years. And I basically, me and a high school buddy, I think when we were in grade 11, just decided one day that we were going to start riding road bikes. It was kind of pre Lance Armstrong. I was, for some explainable reason, I was obsessed with Jan Ulrich the year he won the tour. Um, Even though the tour wasn't even on TV really back then. I don't want to call myself an athlete. I'm not all that athletic, but I was definitely into sports growing up. I always joked that I'm not great at any sport, but I could play pretty much every sport competently. So cycling was just kind of an add-on at first, and then pretty quickly became obsessed with the kind of the gear side of cycling and just the nuances of how cool a bike build can be and how there's almost infinite variance of how you can build a bike and how a bike can be designed. And so I slowly kind of stripped away those other sports and rode more as I got older. And So I professionally, I was always loved kind of architecture and design, but was never very aesthetically talented. So ended up doing a master's of environmental studies, urban planning, along with a law degree. Really, it was the influence was more kind of architecture, design, and urban planning. And I ended up doing planning law for a few years, but I always had that kind of design and creation itch, and I think cycling and just building bikes kind of scratched that for me. I guess long story short, I was working as a lawyer and still pretty bike obsessed. I was big into these weird kind of esoteric European brands like Olmo and Carrera and Fondries that nobody carried in North America. I guess back then the only guys I rode with, and when cycling was not cool yet, were kind of old Italian and Polish guys who were big into all these European brands. And then I looked around at every shop in Toronto really just selling, Specialized and Bianchi and Trek and Cannondale, and I was like, no, that's not really what gets me going. After probably not enough thought, I decided I was going to quit my law job. And the plan was to start a distribution company. And then the bike shop was sort of a little bit of I don't want to call it a second thought, but it was sort of the smaller project. And the very long story short is after a few years of running the distribution company, I realized that the bike shop made me a lot really more satisfied personally, and building awesome bikes for people was what I enjoyed. Nobody ever told me we were the best distributor in the world, but slowly more and more people told me we were their favorite bike shop in the world. And so I kind of looked at my business and said, well, I guess I should focus on what I'm good at, which seemed to be building a unique shop.
Yeah, just a quick comment on sort of how you got into it through your sort of love of architecture and design. A little reveal of personal information about myself to our listeners. I work in architecture. Have a lot, obviously a lot of friends in architecture that are also into cycling, and I have noticed that, and sort of how I feel about it. I'm on the more technical side of architecture, but it's such a great sort of similarity because it's something that you want and typically is very aesthetically beautiful, but you need to think of it from a technical perspective for its function. Hearing you say you coming from that, I always feel like a lot of people come from that, and there's a lot of similarities between sort of architecture, industrial designers,
Hmm. Hmm.
planners, designers, and,
Totally.
and cyclists.
I think that form intersecting with function is just what it's all about, right? Like trying to create something beautiful that is also functionally as perfect as it can be, and that's a challenge. Aesthetics and function don't always align, and so for me, for sure, that's kind of the part of the beauty of how do you make a frame with an odd geometry still look good, or how do you create something that has aerodynamic elements but doesn't look like a windsurf board. That for sure is part of the challenge. I think I've learned over the years, when people say a no compromise design, it's like, no, every design has a compromise. It's all about what you're trying to achieve, and what you're willing to compromise on and what you're willing to not settle on. I think that kind of wrestling with the aesthetic and the functional is what it really comes down to, for sure.
You mentioned how you started the shop partly because you were obsessed with these like obscure brands. And I remember a big reason why I came to you when I was looking to buy the bike that I eventually got from you, which I think I've mentioned in past episodes, is a low from San Francisco. Is I wanted something that wasn't a Cannondale or Specialized Bianchi, whatever. And I didn't have the biggest budget by any means, and I went in to talk to you, and I just remember you had actually quite a number of options that were within my range. So I just wanted to know, like, because you carry these mostly boutique brands, or at least in my mind, when you're like deciding on a frame builder you want to carry in the shop, what kind of things are you looking for?
I guess at the heart of it is, am I personally attracted to their work in some way? I definitely over the years have tried to kind of distill hundreds or even thousands of customer interactions into more than just what I like, but trying to get a sense of what people are looking for and what are let's say, what are things in the bike marketplace that are missing, like, gaps or new opportunities. But I guess the honest answer, Warren, is it's like a kind of almost unquantifiable combination of aesthetics, build quality, as far as we can tell, attention to detail, technology, even value. Like if something is good but seems just massively overpriced, that doesn't impress me. It's a lot of things. It's one of I don't want to be as pretentious to say like, oh, when you see it, you know it. But there's certainly a combination of like, does it just get me excited? Does it, as a bike geek who's seen a lot of bikes, do I just get stoked on it? As a shop, we're pretty collaborative with all of the employees. Jesse, who's our kind of master mechanic, and Brian, who's our fitter. We'll all kind of get together and take a look at something and see if we're all excited, or if there's dialogue to be had. But some of it is also like, who's the person behind the brand. In the case of a smaller builder or a hand builder, a lot of it is that person or that small shop. Like, you bought a bike from me, but you're also buying a bike from Andrew Lowe. So it's
Mhm.
a lot of factors, really. Some of it is, and I mentioned who's behind the brand because I kind of, hopefully Blacksmith will be around for another 100 years. But I seriously said to customers before, when talking about the brand or the builder, if Blacksmith is went bankrupt tomorrow, you'd still have a Lowe or a Marinoni, and you still have that relationship. So that is part of it. The uniqueness and the willingness to maybe push boundaries a little bit. I think we're definitely a little more inclined to take risks with newer builders or brands as a shop. And often I'll order a bike for myself or one of our employees to ride first before we offer a brand. I'll give like a few examples. Like someone like Bastion, I think I was the first dealer in the world for them. But when they were building prototypes, I was already talking to those guys and almost ordered one of the first 10 prototypes because I'm crazy. Or a brand like Fesca, where I think it was, their carbon bikes I had seen for a couple years at the North American Handbuilt Show. They were there maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. But then I saw their Doppler, the titanium carbon combo, and was just kind of blown away by the design. And sometimes those decisions are like, well, if I'm this blown away, someone else has got to be into this as well. I kind of do trust my gut a little bit. Sometimes we don't overthink it, and we want to work with new builders. And on some level, even if we just sell a few bikes for a new builder, that it's still giving that person business. And I think people sometimes from outside look at Blacksmith and they do, and oh, we just do these weird boutique brands. And the truth is, we do a lot of variety. We sell Orbea and Chapter 2, and we build race bikes, and we build super commuters. We kind of build it all. The idea is hopefully to have a roster of builders that just cover a lot of spectrum in terms of everything: aesthetic, budget, material. So like someone like you, Warren, if whatever your budget is, and even whatever your material preference, if I can say, hey, I have 2 or 3 really awesome choices, and then it really comes down to, who do you have a connection with? That to me is the best situation. Kind of sometimes feel almost bad for bike shops who are carrying just like 3 or 4 core brands. And it's like, yeah, well, everyone who walks in the door, they're going to tell you that bike is right for you. And if an Orbea is right for you, I'm happy to order you one and spec it out the way it should be for you. But we're just as likely to say, well, if this Orbea is not right for you, why don't we design you a custom bike? And that's where I think, the industry is probably 99 point something percent stock versus custom. And I think the reality is more than 0.1% of people would be way happier on a bike that was custom designed for them. And that I think is a bit, to me, of a misnomer in the industry, where a lot of these like bigger brands say, hey, you can customize your bike endlessly. And it's like, well, no, picking your bar width and a paint color is not custom. That's maybe personalized, or, okay, you're properly sized. But a fully custom design from the ground up with a hand built frame builder, to me, is definitely a more involved, but often a better outcome process that the industry doesn't really sell because it's hard to do that and it's not scalable. And there's a lot of kind of, time and expertise that's needed from the bike shop, from the builder, patience on the side of the customer to wait for something that gets built for them. That's probably what I love most about our bike shop and what we do is taking the time to build something right for people.
I feel like because Warren and I are so familiar with the shop, and we're customers and stuff, we've done maybe a bit of a disservice in sort of explaining more clearly what Blacksmith does. And I always sort of felt like when I'm sort of explaining it to people, I'll get you to explain it kind of in your own words, but it's a bit of a dream factory. I mean, like you said, you give a lot of range of options. So whatever the dream is, you can, probably fit it in, whether it's a commuter or a gravel bike or a cross bike or a road bike or whatever. But it's not a typical bike shopping experience where you just go in and say, hey, I'm a 56, okay, we've got these 3 bikes in there, and this is your price range. It's a personalized process that you work closely with the customer in a consultation and fitting, giving them options for the best thing. So sort of in your words, could you explain what the ethos of Blacksmith is? When you get a new customer, when someone comes in asking for a new bike, what the process is when you want to start a new build with that customer.
You started describing it pretty well. You're in architecture, you were saying, Tony. The way I try to describe it to people is like, if you hire an architect, they're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to hopefully execute your vision to the best outcome, right? And that's more about how I see our bike shop is, the odds that you're going to walk in and I'm going to have a size, in your case, Tony, 58 sitting on the floor ready to go out the door are pretty much zero with us. Maybe 2%. We have bikes in the shop. They're just, our bikes are more examples of what we can build. And then the idea is we're going to then go build it for you. So that definitely occasionally freaks people out when they're just used to that template that you're going to walk into a bike shop and walk out with a bike. And that's okay. We're not for everybody. But yeah, I mean, really the idea is get to know you with a consult and fitting session and, really figure out who you are as a rider and your riding style, the kind of rides you go on, the kind of bike you think you want, any existing preferences, obviously budget, material, and just try to guide you to a good result. So fit for us is pretty much paramount, and fit and kind of riding style are the things that dictate where we go more than anything. And to back up to what I was saying earlier, we're not against stock bikes at all. And if your geometry works for a stock bike, then awesome. But the idea is start with you as a blank slate. And I almost say, like, if we were going to design you a bike, Tony, based on what we're seeing out of your fit data and riding style and your age and flexibility and injury history, and design it in a vacuum. And sometimes I'll even do CAD drawings just to kind of say, hey, here's a make believe bike that would fit you great. And then we kind of say, all right, what is out there that we can get you? And go through our roster of builders, bike brands, figure out what the best result is. And obviously then we drill into part selection, and yeah, but really try to figure out what is best for you. And I think that also involves really being a little bit bold in terms of not just following industry trends. So, we can be a little bit old school at times with things like threaded bottom brackets. Like, we hate press fit bottom brackets at Blacksmith. Even though we can deal with them, we hate integrated seat collars, which every big bike brand has, because they say it's going to be more aerodynamic, and which is just a load of horse shit, basically. We're at times kind of the anti-modern bike shop, but then we're building super modern machines. So we try to kind of take the old school, like Italian frame builder Dario Pegoretti would, like, you don't get a fit with Dario. He tells you what your geometry is, but also in a kind of kinder, softer way, and embracing that. Here's my example is like fully internal front ends, like internal cable routing right now. I know it's a pain in the ass for mechanics, But I also know that everybody wants them, including myself. So, we just try to, survey the landscape and balance that reality. And so we're the kind of shop who would, if you asked us, all right, I can get this new Mosaic GT1 with the new NV integrated front end, we're not just going to say, yeah, 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 that you need that. I'm more likely to say, yeah, it's a pain in the ass if you ever want to change a headset bearing, but it's cool, and you probably want it on your bike because that's where bike design is going. So, we're try to be that honest guide to get you the bike you want. It's not that I'm trying to sell you a certain bike. It's I'm trying to figure out the bike that is going to make you happy. It's definitely more of a less of a business. I know it is a business, but less of a retail store and more of a, it's kind of like we're your bike concierge. We also try to be that kind of voice to help people make decisions that will allow them to ride a bike for 5 or 10 years versus 1 or 2. And I think that's another thing for us is like we're small enough that we're building probably 100 to 150 bikes a year, give or take, and we don't need you, Tony, to come back every year to buy a bike. I'd rather build you something really special. And then maybe in 2 or 3 years, you come back and say, you know what, Mike, I want a gravel bike now. The road bike's awesome.
I mean, you better prepare for a long wait. Because I rode in Montreal. When I was in Vancouver, I rode a friend's '86 Marinoni, and we went up Cypress and around sort of the Vancouver proper area, and it rode beautifully. So I mean, if that's what's the math on that? All 35 years, 36 years. So if I can get that out of my Marinoni. But I just want to tell a quick story, and sort of it's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, and it's about when I was getting my bike, and kind of why I feel like you fit sort of Cycling Fashion Week. Your store sort of fits that, and then kind of what you were talking about sort of getting the right bike for the customer. That's what you want. Is when I got my Marinoni, it actually shipped with all the parts. So it's a custom frame, geometry, paint, all that stuff. But it shipped with what would be their sort of spec for my price range. And we went in and we looked at it, and we pulled out the seat post, we pulled out the stem, we pulled out the bars, and we just said, actually, you said to me, because I didn't want to start ruffling any feathers, you said, this is ugly. And you went to kind of, you went in and you sort of found things in the same sort of range that sort of fit better with the bike, fit better with each other. All those little elements, you took a little extra time. It just made, not only obviously there's a comfort of the bike to it, but it's made that thing that I knew I would love anyways, just love that much more. And it's made my bike that much better looking because you took a little bit of extra time to sort of look at it and say, you know what, this doesn't fit with what we're going with. I'm gonna look around the parts bin, and we're gonna get something that goes with it. And that's kind of a lot of the ethos of Cycling Fashion is that idea that the details matter, and just sort of getting everything just right.
We try. I mean, you know what? For me, it's like, what is the cost to make sure your bar stem and seat post all match? Even Tony, if it cost me $100 and I threw those ugly parts out, that's maybe at times the good and the bad that I run Blacksmith more like my personal service course than a business. It's like I want your bike to be awesome. And honestly, guys, I used to be so freaking bike obsessed. I used to be crazy, like spreadsheet, switching components around 100 times on a build. And I actually don't do that as much with my own bikes. I try to, do a nice bike every year or two that I pay some attention to, but I spend more time on my customers' bikes. And again, like the knowledge that that bike really does make you that happy is awesome. That is for sure the number one reason I run the shop. And for all the harder days and longer days, and this year, and part shortages and dealing with COVID, building bikes and being part of that design process and getting those little details right for sure are what make us happy. And I think because I was obsessed with those things as a customer and always felt like most bike shops didn't really give a shit about that stuff and just wanted to get you out the door. I That's kind of why you come to pick up your bike with us. And again, here I'll talk smack about my shop. You will not pick up your bike in 10 minutes. It's probably going to take an hour and a half because when you come to pick it up, we give you a final fitting, and then we pick the bar tape after we've finalized the saddle selection. Then we pick the bottle cages, and it's a bit of like an aesthetic, like we're prancing peacocks at that point, just trying to make the bike look as awesome as possible. But like for us, that's fun.
Similar to what you're talking about, in choosing, bike manufacturers and builders and stuff. Is that the same sort of way you look at the kits you carry, and the apparel is kind of just something that you like, that you would want to wear on the bike? How are you choosing that?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of that personal draw for sure. With clothing, I'm also a little bit, the aesthetic has to be there for me, and I guess that just everyone's got their own opinion. As a consumer, grew up riding, I've probably ridden every major brand, Rafa when it was, pretty new, Assos. I've tried a bib short or two over the years. Don't love their branding. You can throw them in the canal. Warren, I did listen to you destroying them, and I'm like 80% in agreement with all that. So I will say, part of the reason we carry smaller brands is started out of necessity. That I opened the bike shop 10 years ago. There were a lot of other shops in Toronto, so for example, like Rafa already had a store. I wasn't going to be able to be a Rafa dealer, so I was almost forced to try to be more creative. Otherwise, I just would have been carrying just Pro Lazumi and nothing but the bigger brands. And no offense to them, they make some good stuff. Yeah. So for me, again, it goes back to wanting to be unique, and I've always kind of been a person who's like, if like I don't want to bring golf into this. I don't golf at all anymore. But when I did golf, I instead of like a tailor-made driver, I went out and bought some idiotic long drive driver that was stupid, but it made me happy because it was cool and different. And so for me, cycling is about the just the enjoyment of the ride, and like you have to put on a kit, so why not make it something that looks good and feels good on you? And so that kind of just trying to find unique voices in the soft goods and kit world is was definitely something that probably a year or two in, I was already like, okay, I need to not just carry. I remember carrying Castelli because I thought the stuff was really good from a functional perspective. And then, my customers would come in having purchased it at Mountain Equipment Co op. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I need to, be a little more unique. So, although now they're back to actually being a good brand, they're not at, big box stores anymore. I'm more into Castelli. They're getting back in my good books. But, um, so yeah, I mean, some of it is just looking for stuff that's unique. And again, like bikes, it's kind of like that hard to describe combination of aesthetics and then very functional stuff. Like I'm pretty nerdy about like the build quality of the clothing, the fabrics that are used, the grippers, the like all those little details. Once you've seen like 100 or 200 different cycling kits, I'm sure you guys are the same. Like you can pick it up and really get a sense of quality. But yeah, I do think it comes down to like, do I think it's awesome? Do I think, even if it's not exactly for me, do I think it's unique and like kind of fills a void in the cycling world? Like, yeah, I think I was the first map retailer in the world actually. Again, that's just being a small shop, and I don't have a boss, so like if I like a brand, I'll just straight up email them and be like, "Yo, can I be a dealer for you?" And sometimes they say yes. Yeah, map was one where I was like, just cool design, looked like decent quality. I got a couple kits in and I was like, oh, actually like really good quality. And we just started with them, and they've grown a ton as a brand where, I think on the technical side, they're actually quietly doing some of the best stuff in the world. If you look at like their bib shorts, super cool stuff. It's complicated too. Like I'll be honest, like Panormal as an example, we're a dealer for. We really like them. When they first approached me many years ago, I actually wasn't that interested. Their lineup was pretty small, and I thought too expensive, to be totally honest. And it was only a few years later, after they added to the lineup and improved their pricing a little, that we ended up carrying them. And we've been really happy with them. And we have like 7 mesh. We carry, because I think on the technical side, like jackets, they're phenomenal, and I like that they're a Canadian brand. So sometimes just supporting people, and again, like I was saying, frame builders. Sometimes like just the people behind the brand and wanting to support them is a good thing. Like I know actually Velo Color, for example, started carrying Velocio, and they're a great brand, like super socially conscious and great in terms of women's cycling. And so they were a brand I had on my radar, and I was glad to see actually Velo Color pick them up. So there's so many cool cycling brands out there. On I almost wish I could carry more.
Yeah, I mean, we did a top five episode of our top five kits, and then I put out to our our listeners and on Instagram, sort of people share your top five kits, and the sort of range that people came, we got a lot of we got a lot of feedback, and the range that people came with just shows you sort of what you were talking about, or where you were, Rafa, early, like how far cycling apparel and cycling fashion has come. Because sort of when I started, it was, pro team jersey or, club kit or Rafa. And now this endless sort of, you know, list of brands that do amazing quality, amazing style, kind of fit everyone's sort of range. So I think it's a bit of a golden era for cycling and cycling style.
Yes, you're totally right. I mean, I'm going to be very honest here. The reality is most of these smaller brands are using the same 3 factories to produce their clothing. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That maybe the same 3 European factories. I don't know much about the brands producing in Asia. I guess what I'm saying though is like you don't need to own your own factory. So cycling clothing, like there are a lot of cool young small startups where it's like if you have a good design idea and a good eye and a good sense of materials and cuts, and it's not rocket science how to design a cycling kit. And on some level I think that's a cool thing that you're seeing all these, like all the Australian brands and UK brands. I know you were into Albion, Warren, like they're
Hmm.
doing super cool stuff from what I've seen. So I think you're right, Tony. It's a golden age for sure. If you want a winter jacket now compared to 7, 8 years ago, oh my God. It's like everyone is making a ridiculously good light winter jacket where I remember doing like custom Louis Garneau winter jackets 6 or 7 years ago for the shop, and they were warm, but it was like wearing a frickin' garbage bag, like zero breathability. Some of it is just down to the material suppliers like the Scholars and the Middies who are just, offering really cool fabrics. And, I think it is a great time for clothing design. And
Now, I did want to ask something. Is we heard a rumor? I've heard it from a few people now, actually, that Blacksmith is going to be making your own frame. So we wanted to know if you could let us in on that a bit, or tease us a bit with some information about that.
all right, Warren, I'm going to tell you the truth. So we're a few weeks away from being a little more public about it.
So is this a
But I'll
scoop then? Is this a bit of a cycling fashion week scoop? So come out before your official public, so you can keep it brief and tease, but we got a little scoop here.
my buddy Tyler from Bike Rumor is going to be very pissed off at me because you're getting the scoop. Yeah, I mean, so I'm happy to tell you about it. It's the brand is called Bridge Bike Works. It is a totally separate project from Blacksmith. Um, Blacksmith will be a dealer for Bridge, but it is a standalone project. We'll have an international dealer network for the brand. I guess the quick story is, I guess 2 years ago or so, I met or sorry, I talked to my partner Frank about this for the first time. He was a customer, and his brother was a customer, so like big bike riders. And long story short, we've been working on it for about 20 months or so. We are bringing bike manufacturing back to North America. So we're going to be building carbon fiber bikes in Toronto. Um,
Ooh.
our first model is going to be an all road bike, basically a road bike designed to take up to a 40 millimeter tire because we want it all. Kind of the N+1 killer is the idea. You can go to bridgebikeworks.com if you want to see a little more. It's kind of a pre-order website. We'll have a new site launching in a few weeks' time. I guess the long story short, if I had to give you why I'm doing it, and a lot of friends have been like, "Oh, you're building like titanium, right?" And I'm like, "Nope." "Steel, right?" "Nope." So carbon's definitely a bigger uh, bigger bite to chew, or a bigger chunk to bite off. But I think for me, steel and titanium, there's really phenomenal steel and titanium builders in North America, and um, carbon's the area where I always imagined being able to do something more unique. And for me, the big barrier was I didn't want to produce in Asia for a variety of reasons, which, you know, social, environmental, personal. I didn't want to be flying to China 20 times a year. But I always thought there was no way I could produce carbon bikes in North America that were better than what was out there. You can do tube to tube carbon in your garage if you want, but to do something better than what existed, I didn't really see a way. And the kind of fortuitous turn was I met my partner Frank, and he's got good kind of entrepreneurial and manufacturing experience, but specifically in composites. Knows more about carbon than I do, which is, in the general public rare. I know a lot about carbon. uh, Knows way more than I do, and so it was kind of an amazing kind of yin yang sort of thing, where he was sort of this carbon and manufacturing expert, and I was hopefully a bike expert. And so we made it happen. But we're about, I would say, 95% through the engineering. We're about 90% through building out our factory, which is in Toronto. Yeah, we're super stoked. I mean, I I've learned a lot selling a lot of cool bikes and helping design a lot of cool bikes. And also, we service lots of folks, so not just our own customers, but we service Pinarellos and Canyons and Specialized. And so, we've literally seen pretty much every bike in the world come through the Blacksmith doors. So it's definitely influenced Bridge, but definitely its own thing. And I guess the goal, in 30 words or less, and I'll shut up, is, I always thought, I've got these amazing bike brands, like you guys called them boutique builders, but the handcrafted guys like Argonaut and Fesca and Bastion, who are doing amazing things, but you know tend to be on the expensive side. And my hunch is don't have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to engineer and build their bikes. And then on the other side, you've got the monsters, the Specialized in Canyons and Giants and Cannondales, who have massive R&D budgets. And I know people who work for those companies who are really smart, dedicated people. But those frames are being built in Asia, I would say definitely at a lower quality control than Ben Farver at Argonaut, who is, handing his customer the bike going out the door. And so for us, the goal really was, could we build something to that absolute high-end boutique artisan quality, but with the engineering and the performance focus that any of those big bike brands have. We're building a factory that we can say is literally a world-class composite facility, and that we should be able to build a bike that is as good or better than anything in the world, but do it in Toronto and do it at a price that is reasonable. So our frame sets are going to be $5,000 Canadian, about 4,000 US, 4,200 or so, which is definitely not cheap, but about the same or better than a Specialized S Works or a Cervelo Aspero. Or we're pretty proud that we're aiming to build bikes here that really hopefully can go head to head with bikes that are built in the Far East.
Well, that's some pretty exciting news. I'm glad Cycling Fashion Week got one of the first sort of scoops on it, and we'll make sure to sort of promote it as you guys disseminate more social media and more information.
Tony, I'm going to interrupt you. Here's all you need to know. This is for you guys. Our 5 colors are going to be gunmetal gray, tan, kind of earth, sage green, baby blue, and pink champagne. So this bike company will definitely be more along the lines of Cycling Fashion Week than most big brands.
Oh, we're excited. All right, so we like to end off all our interviews with a rapid fire. So this is where we give you, a couple options. You have to choose one, and maybe if you want, just a very quick reason why. Now, I know you love sort of all elements of cycling. I've seen, some of your personal bikes and the way you go, but I need you to choose one. Because I know in your head you're going to want to say, oh, well, this reason, that reason, but I just need you to choose one. So we'll start off: steel, carbon, titanium, or aluminum.
Oh, you son of a bitch. Um, okay. I'm going to give you a 1 and 1A. I have to say carbon now that I'm a co-founder of a carbon bike brand. And carbon is lighter and stiffer than anything out there. But if you really put a gun to my head and I had to buy a bike for the next 50 years, I'd say titanium. It's kind of the super metal. Steel is awesome. Aluminum is really stiff and light, but titanium is a bit of that, like, my buddy Kevin called it like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in every category. It's light enough, stiff enough, comfortable enough, durable enough. It's hard to beat.
All right. All right. Perfect. All right. So tubes, tubeless, or tubular?
Oh, I am pretty old school. I still ride tubulars. I'm terrible, terrible mechanic, but I can still glue and tape tubulars.
All right. White or black socks?
Uh,
I'm gonna put a
well,
caveat because I know. I've seen there's, if they go to your Instagram, they can see the kits you guys have designed personally for Blacksmith, and so you go. I feel like this question might not really pertain to you because I feel like you might want to say blue or green or something else.
yeah,
But
I'm an '80s baby. I do like a little bit of neon, but I'm actually more muted. It's a hard one. I go white.
all right,
White is the only way with cycling, really.
white or black shoes?
Uh, so theoretically white. I've owned white shoes. I've used a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser on a pair of Physique in R1s for like a whole season. But in terms of what I sell in the shop, black. I tell people, like, really the honest truth is black holds up a lot better. So, if you're a pro and you're getting your shoes for free, or you're just super, super aesthetically minded, white is the answer, but black is the reality. Am I breaking hearts? That's the truth.
You're
Yes.
breaking out. I don't. You're breaking Alex's heart because he just thinks you look like a tap dancer if you've got white socks and black shoes. But so I always go black socks. I have black shoes. Sort of similar
So that was
reason.
going to be when you asked white or black socks, the answer is it has to match the shoe.
All right, good. We know that you know the
That's
rules.
good.
Gravel or road?
Um, Gravel. How about that? I've been a lifelong road rider, but I've been hit by cars. I hate potholes. I hate red lights. If you live in Boulder, Colorado, then sure, road is awesome. But as someone who lives in a city and I commute on my bike a lot, but yeah, gravel's awesome. I think every gravel bike I sell to a roadie, no, not a single person has come back and said they regret it. And if anything, a whole bunch of people have sold their road bikes and sometimes gotten 2 sets of wheels for their gravel bikes. But yeah, gravel's awesome. I think it's more of why most people ride a bike, which is for freedom and peace and enjoyment and a little bit of fun athleticism. I love the camaraderie of a bigger road ride too, but I do think for more newer riders, gravel is the way.
Well, I think with we haven't seen it, but with Bridge coming out with the all road and knowing your cycling aesthetic, it's gonna be nice looking. It's gonna give kind of a little more to gravel because some of the stuff that's going on in gravel in terms of the geometry, the slope of the tube, and these flared bars, there's sort of a reason I would never choose gravel. But if someone, if you make a beautiful all road bike that looks just as good hanging on my wall as it does sort of riding, then I think gravel could be ascending its way towards road for me.
So I'll tell you, Tony, we started with that bike. There were like the design requirements for our engineers were, things like no drop seat stays, no drop chain stays. Um, and then so we looked at the engineering behind that, and how much compliance do you get from a drop seat stay, things like that. But the truth is, for me, it was, can we design a bike within an aesthetic envelope that performs like we want it to, without really compromising the function of the design? Like, I'll be happy when I have people who've raced Unbound and said it was awesome, and people who go on fast group rides and say it's awesome, and to say like, okay, we designed a bike that it can do not everything, but a lot, we'll be pretty stoked on.
It's exciting. It's exciting. Like I said, we're going to look forward to it. We're going to, Cycling Fashion Week here is good friends with everyone at Blacksmith, so we'll make sure sort of to promote it. Let's at least let people see what's going on. If you want to follow Blacksmith on Instagram, it is at Blacksmith Cycle. You want to give us your website both for Bridge and Blacksmith, just right quick.
Sure. I mean, it's same as Instagram. It's just blacksmithcycle.com. It's bridgebikeworks.com. Blacksmith, we're actually revamping the site. So if you go to it today, it's probably going to be broken, but we got some big changes to come. We'll be doing a lot more online for 2022. So we're pretty stoked on that. And Bridge is actually, we'll be turning over the site to a newer site in a couple weeks, but we are taking pre-orders now. There will be a lot more about Bridge in about 2 weeks' time, with some of the bigger media covering the launch.
All right, great. Well, if you're in Toronto and you want to see them in shop, they are on Sororan Avenue. Mike, this has been a pleasure. There's a lot I knew about you. A lot of Warren probably knew as well, but there's a lot we learned, and I think our listeners are going to appreciate getting all the information. Thanks again. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it. It was fun.
Moving on to our next segment, our most famous segment called Into the Canal, where we take a cycling product, could be cycling fashion, could be cycling equipment, could be parts, could be bikes, anything we absolutely hate from the world of cycling, and we toss it into Montreal's Lachine Canal, where it goes to die. Tony, let's start with you.
Mine's not an on the bike thing. Some people might argue this has nothing to do with it, but fortunately, this is our podcast, and I can kind of come up with the rules as I feel. But as the weather is dipping, and the group rides are sort of drying up, people are riding inside, but cycling is a social sport, and we make a lot of good friends through it. And as the group rides sort of end, people still want to see each other. So you start to see people more in their non-cycling apparel, their non-cycling kit, as you go to, end of year meetups or, bar or someone's party or something like that. And what I notice seems to be a staple of the off race, off bike uniform of the cyclists in the colder months is Bluntstone boots, the famous Australian boot company. And these things are awful. It's probably an unreasonable passion of hate for it, but I just can't stand them. I just hate them. I hate the way they look. I hate what they represent. I hate everything about them. And I would just like all cyclists out there, when you're, when the weather dips and you're not on your bike and you're not wearing your booties or whatever, just go buy some nice boots, something, I can get down with a bean boot, Fries, Red Wings, there's all sorts. I'm throwing Bluntstones into the canal, and they are cycling related.
I don't own them. So.
Yeah, I bike around, I commute in Red Wings or bean boots, so you just approve those. So yeah. I used to own a pair of shoes that weren't Blundstones, but they looked like them. I forget what the brand was, and I felt weird. Yeah, it just didn't feel right when I was wearing them. I think I deep down knew they looked horrible, and that's why I got rid of them.
Just for reference, are we doing white boots, white socks, or white boots, black socks? What are we doing here?
If you have white boots and they're if you can find white Blundstones, you can keep them. Because white boots is like, that's like what the Finnish snipers used to wear, those full white outfits in the snow to take out the Russians. And so if you look like a Finnish sniper, then Yeah, all for it. You can wear whatever boot you want if you look like a Finnish sniper.
All right, Warren, what do you got for us this week?
So similar to Tony, I have something related to the change in weather as we're moving towards winter, but it's specifically to on the bike apparel. It's specifically about headwear, and I feel like I see there's something about cycling kit, and we kind of touched on it when we introduced the peppermint giveaways. Like, when you're first getting into cycling, you do anything to stay warm, like tinfoil, random whatever things. I think some people, even if they've been cycling a long time, are still reluctant to invest in decent winter cycling kit for whatever reason. And that's why I think I see a lot of these winter skull caps going around. And by that, I mean, like, there's no brim, they're just a cap. They're usually made of merino wool, I think. I mean, which is a great fabric, as we said. But these skull caps, you're one step away from wearing a bandana. So if you're going to wear a winter cap, just get one with a brim. It's going to help block like road debris, snow or rain, and it's just not going to look stupid. Like a winter skull cap, you're basically wearing a winter bandana. So winter skull caps, and obviously summer skull caps, but I want to talk about specifically winter skull caps because that's the season we're heading into. But yeah, winter skull caps are in the canal. They look like you're like cross country skiing, which I'm not necessarily throwing that in the canal. It's just looking like you're doing that while cycling is no good.
Warren, I've known you for more than 20 years, and that is the smartest thing you've ever said in your entire life, and the thing I agree with the most that you've ever said. Yeah, I can't add. Perfect statement.
I'm gonna throw a gravel bike into the canal, and we've been pretty harsh on big gravel on this podcast lately. Um, Last episode, again, we had Lily Hanson Gillis where she threw gravel bars into the canal. These kind of wide, flared out bars that people have started putting on gravel bikes lately, which again is the part of the ploy of the gravel industrial complex to take over the world. And there's a bike model that came to my attention this week. I actually don't know if it's a new thing, but it's certainly in the zeitgeist or the air of the moment of gravel, essentially looking a lot more like mountain bike than it ever did. And it's the Specialized Diverge Expert E5 Evo. Already there, like that's a mouthful for a bike name. But my God, I was looking at that bike, and I actually don't know why I was looking at that bike. Oh yeah, I think I was on Cycling Tips. I was looking for news or stuff that we could talk about on the podcast because obviously we got to learn about where the releases are coming from and everything. And I saw this bike. They were doing a review of it, and I just looked at the pictures, and I absolutely could not believe it. You've got these bikes that are coming out like the Specialized Diverge Expert E5 Evo, which again, these bike names are just getting longer and longer. This is basically a mountain bike. You look at it, like the sloping on it is absolutely ridiculous. The top tube is basically going into the ground. There's no drop from the saddle to the bars, and it's got flat bars with these essentially these brakes that are on the flat bars like that. It's got giant tires. These look like they're 50 millimeters or something. Might as well be a fat bike. And this is just I can't stand for this. Gravel has gone too far. We need to stop the scope creep of gravel essentially becoming mountain bike. I am not a mountain bike guy. Anything that requires skills or bike handling skills, I'm out. I'm not interested in that. I just want to ride and suffer. Basically, that's what road cycling is all about for me. So I'm throwing the Specialized Diverge Expert E5 Evo straight into the canal.
So you didn't bring this up. We didn't pre-discuss the canal this week, and so I just looked it up as you were talking about it. And I mean, it's hideous, sort of on its own merits. And then you're right. The big gravel and the lobbyists in Washington pushing gravel on us is getting out of hand. We need some lobby reform at the Capitol building. But the thing is, like, this is essentially a like 90s hardtail, 80s, 90s hardtail, but looking way less cool. And I mean, I'm sure it probably in a way rides better because those used to have the like V brakes that barely stopped, and they were 26-inch rims and stuff. But like, they looked amazing. Like, I still see them, and some people convert them into commuters or see them stuff, and they still look great. So it's like, this is sort of like, it's just like this ugly version of that. And then yeah, you're right. Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, it's kind of like, it's sort of upsetting me that this is out there, that Specialized felt this was okay.
It's not even a hardtail, Tony. I think it's a rigid mountain bike. Like I think there's the Future Shock or whatever in the stem area, but or in the fork, sorry. But like, I mean, that can't do much for you. It's basically a rigid mountain bike. It is. It's not even. I know it's coming from Big Gravel, but it's basically Big Mountain Bike. Like, I think it's like the end of the Scooby Doo episode, and you take off Big Gravel's mask, and it's just Big Mountain Bike, because that's what this is. It's a mountain bike.
And what's crazy is that this is an aluminum frame. So I've nothing against aluminum frames, but I mean, it's an aluminum frame with what seems to be kind of very average components, and it's 2,600 US dollars. So in Canadian dollars, what is that, like 3,700 or something like that? So it's quite expensive. And I was looking at the Cycling Tips review. Shout out to Cycling Tips, by the way. I think they're a great website. But they say the highs. Okay, the highs of this bike. It's an incredibly fun, confidence-inspiring handling on a versatile frame platform. Okay, and then you look at the lows, and it says slower than most gravel bikes. Like, no kidding. I mean, this is a probably what is a quite heavy mountain bike.
Warren, I'm sorry, I just got to jump back to Warren's comment with the Scooby Doo thing. Like, I think we've broken some sort of like conspiracy theory thing where Big Gravel doesn't exist. It's just Big Mountain Bike, and they knew that like road cyclists wouldn't go straight to mountain bike, so they've been easing everybody out, everybody in with like a few small doses of gravel, and then the next thing you know, every person's just going to be on some full squish like mountain bike. They're just it's like they're just giving little tastes of getting off road. This is Big Gravel doesn't exist. It's all just a front for Big Mountain Bike.
And big mountain bikes just pulling the strings in the back.
Yeah.
I think we've uncovered like a massive cycling industry conspiracy theory right now. It's like an episode of the X-Files or something. But yeah, I think that's it. It's just fucking mountain biking at this point. Like, and that's fine if that's what you want to do.
But then buy a mountain bike.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to do it, buy a mountain bike that you can actually go do some real trails on and some, some difficult stuff. Like, this is sort of the worst of both worlds. You're not as fast as a gravel bike. You're not as capable if you wanted sort of difficult terrain, right? This is like a city hybrid.
So I guess this is where the world is going. Like, it's all going to be mountain bikes at some point, and we're going to be like 75, telling our grandchildren, I used to ride a bike with 25 millimeter tires on pavement. And then our grandchildren be like, yeah, sure, grandpa, let's get you to bed. All right. That's another episode of Cycling Fashion Week in the books. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Warren. To all our listeners, don't forget to go follow us on Instagram at Cycling Fashion Week. Send us emails, cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com, and please keep sending your bikes for us to review. We didn't do it this week because we had a long interview, so we try to keep these episodes somewhat digestible so we don't put too many segments, but we will for sure get back to this segment in the next few weeks. So send us your bikes. We rate your bikes for free, or we rate your kit for a fee. cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com. Tell us the story about it, and we'll post it on Instagram and rate it. And I just want to remind people of the fantastic giveaway that we have with a brand that we like very much, Peppermint Cycling. Send us the weirdest piece of cycling kit that you've ever worn in the winter. Tell us what it is. Tell us the story. Send us a DM or an email. We'll pick the best submissions, and the winner will get a free cycling kit from Peppermint. On that note, thanks everyone, and see you soon for another episode of Cycling Fashion Week. Take care.